What if I told you that the most ordinary morning in history became its most haunting time capsule? Imagine waking up, baking bread, arguing over prices in the market, completely unaware that by nightfall, your world would be sealed in ash for nearly 2,000 years. Pompeii didn't know it was living its final day, and that's what makes this story so unsettling. Before we walk those ancient streets, subscribe and like this video. If you're fascinated by lost cities, buried secrets, and the human stories frozen in time, you're going to want to stay until the end. Because what Pompeii reveals isn't just about disaster. It's about life, caught in motion. Now tell me in the comments, if you lived at the foot of a volcano, would you ever truly feel safe? Or would you always be waiting for the mountain to breathe? I want to know what you think before we step into that final morning. Pompeii looked eternal. The morning light spreads over red-tiled roofs, over a town that smells of baking bread, olive oil, the brine of the nearby sea. Children run between columns. A baker slides loaves from a wood-fired oven. A woman rinses the day from her hair in the communal baths. A merchant sharpens his voice and his coins as he calls his wares. Musicians tune, dogs sleep in the shade, and terraces on Vesuvius's slopes glow with vines and orchards. In the ordinary motions of chores and greetings, there is a quiet confidence. The mountain is a distant presence, a backdrop for the market's bustle, rather than an actor in everyday life. This is Pompeii, before the day the air changes. To walk its streets is to enter a chapter of Roman life in which luxury and labor meet without pretense. Frescoed walls bright with myth, mosaics underfoot that tell of gods and fishermen, small altars where offerings are placed, loaves cooling on wooden shelves, amphora stacked like waiting sentinels. The baths hiss with steam. The forum hums with conversation. In the villas, bright pigments survive on plaster, portraits still capturing the pride of a homeowner arranging his table. Slaves move with the practiced ease of routine. Children's games leave traces like fingerprints on marble. Everything is textured, the roughness of rope, the coolness of marble, the sweetness of figs crushed in a market basket. These are the details that anchor us to people whose names are lost, but whose lives remain visible in the ordinary things they used and loved. Vesuvius sits at the edge of this panorama, neither an enemy nor a god in the talk of most citizens, just a familiar skyline. Its slopes are cultivated. Its soil is fertile. There are stories and warnings, of course, odd tremors felt at odd hours, but life presses forward. Roads are swept, wine is poured, children learn trades. The complacency is not ignorance so much as a human habit, normalcy, the muscle memory of routine, the belief that tomorrow will look like today. Then the mountain begins to speak in a different register. At first it is small, a tremor that rattles pottery, a dog that lifts its head and refuses its meal, a fissure that runs like a vein through a wall. People exchange glances, and the anxiety is shrugged away. Earthquakes are part of Mediterranean life. Merchants attribute the shaking to overloaded wagons, to tempers and seasons. The signs are there, but they are woven into ordinary explanations until they are nearly invisible. What would you do if the world under your feet hiccuped and your neighbor went back to sweeping the doorstep? For many, the day unfolds as any other. On August 24th, 79 AD, what begins as rumble becomes roar. The first phase of the catastrophe opens with an explosion from the mountain's heart. A column rises, a leaden pillar that stretches upward and then blooms outward, black and trembling with ash. The sun is swallowed by a sudden pall, daytime becomes dusk. This ash column is a towering plume of volcanic debris and gas launched into the air. Its presence alters light and air, the city's colors drain toward the gray of dust, and the horizon becomes a living shadow. At first, people stand and watch, bewildered, as pumice and cinder begin to fall like a merciless grinding hail. Pumice is a lightweight volcanic stone, full of air, that falls in clumps and layers. It fills the streets, piles on roofs, and grows into a slow, looming weight. At first, citizens shelter under porticos and in doorways, thinking to outwait whatever storm is passing over. Others try to escape toward the sea, toward boats in the harbor, a natural instinct to reach open space and water. But the day changes its character. The sky is darkened, visibility drops to a matter of yards, and the falling pumice begins to accumulate on roofs until they sag and crack. The sound changes too, an unrelenting cascade, the rustle of falling stone, then the heavy groan of timber giving way. Roofs collapse under the added burden. Streets that had lately been jammed with carts and voices become choked corridors of white dust and muffled cries. As pumice piles higher, the city's escape routes narrow. Horses and oxen, exhausted by the heat and noise, falter. The harbor is no refuge. The sea is black with ash and pumice, and a dying light that makes the horizon indistinct. Families move as clusters, clutching children, gathering what they can, jewelry, food, a favorite bowl, then abandoning it when the finality of falling stone becomes too immediate to refuse. Some seek shelter indoors, hoping roofs will shield them. Others press through alleys in a blur, 2 or 3 abreast, driven by the single human imperative to survive. Then, as if the mountain reserves its most terrible gift for the last moment, comes the pyroclastic surge, what scientists call a pyroclastic flow. A dense, fast-moving avalanche of hot gas, ash, and volcanic fragments that can hurtle down slopes at staggering speeds and with lethal temperatures. In plain language, it is a superheated cloud, a mass of choking dust and scalding air that moves like a sliding blanket across the landscape. Where pumice falls slowly and crushingly, the pyroclastic flow moves with a suddenness that leaves no time to decide. It is not a visible wall, but a moving atmosphere of destruction, carrying a heat so intense that it can instantly overwhelm life and melt the ordinary contours of a scene into a single, silent stillness. In those final moments, the rhythm of the city shifts from clamor to a devastating hush. People throw themselves into doorways, some instinctively pray, others clutch a child or a beloved pet. There are gestures that will later arrest archaeologists' attention, one set of bones curled around a small body, a smaller silhouette clasped in a larger hand, a dog still tethered to a post. The heat immobilizes motion, and the ash and gas seal them in positions that will become, centuries later, images of human intimacy frozen against the sweep of time. The surge passes, and with it, an entire urban life is closed, as if behind glass. After the eruption finishes its violent choreography, Pompeii is not immediately destroyed in the cinematic sense of total ruin. Rather, it is buried under meters of ash and pumice. Buildings vanish beneath gray layers. Streets are filled and leveled. The outline of daily life disappears from maps and memory. The city ceases to be a living settlement and becomes, to the world that follows, a field like any other, someone's pasture, a tract of earth on which vines might be replanted. Over years, soil settles, crops are sown, towns move, and languages shift. The echoes of the marketplace fade until the marketplace itself is only a contour in the land. For centuries, the buried city rests beneath a seeming stillness. Time passes in the way countrysides do. Emperors rise and fall, empires fracture. The Mediterranean continues its commerce. People who live above the sleeping ruins may rumble carts across what was once a threshold, unaware of the rooms below their feet or the frescoes beneath their plow. The memory of a place can be outlived by decades and then by centuries until its very name falls into oblivion. Yet that oblivion, paradoxically, preserves. The absence of continual human disturbance locks objects and impressions into a dry, sealed archive. In the 18th century, after many long seasons, chance and necessity begin to pry open this archive. Workers digging for water and drainage, concerned with the practical needs of the living, strike stone that is not natural beach rock, but carved tile, a mosaic floor. Curiosity gives way to excavation. Scholars and patrons descend, and what emerges is not a single spectacle, but layer after layer of a former world. Mosaic patterns preserved under a lid of ash. Frescoes whose pigments, sheltered from sunlight and rain for ages, still retain surprising brilliance. Metal tools encrusted but recognizable, wooden beams carbonized into their shapes. The finds do not scream for attention, they whisper. Each object is a proof that a specific way of life, with its rituals, meals, and affections, has been held in suspension beneath the ground. Archaeologists and excavators approach the work with a mixture of method and wonder. They uncover whole houses as if opening a sealed chest. The atrium, a kitchen, rooms with painted walls depicting myths and pastoral scenes, bowls and amphorae in niches where they have remained undisturbed. The city's plan is revealed, street by street, and with each trench, the intimate details of ordinary life are returned to the present. It is here that archaeologists, guided by observation and careful technique, discover cavities within the compacted ash, voids left where bodies once were. A method is developed to reveal what those air pockets hide. By pouring plaster into the hollows and allowing it to harden, researchers create molds of the space once occupied by people, animals, and objects. When the surrounding ash is removed, the plaster remains as a cast, a three-dimensional imprint of a final posture. The plaster casts transform the way modern eyes see Pompeii. They are not sensational trophies. They are rather solemn testimonials. A cast may capture the angle of a hand, the curve of a child drawn close, the rigid curve of a dog's neck at a tether. The detail arrests and humanizes. Folds of clothing, a clasped thumb, the tilt of a head. They are ordinary gestures turned into testimony by an extraordinary event. Looking at them is to confront a human immediacy that the long sweep of time had smoothed out. Faces we will never name looking back with quiet finality. To stand in the excavated streets is to experience a double vision. On one level, you see the physical traces, the stepping stones worn by centuries of feet, a thermopolium where hot food was sold, the graffiti scratched on a wall, an ancient note of someone's private humor. On another, more inward level, you confront the realization that people like you ate, laughed, argued, and loved here. That humanity is the true resurrection the title promises. Not a return to life in any supernatural sense, but a return of personality, of habits, of domestic detail, from a layer of earth that had seemed to cancel them. The city becomes a mirror. Visitors find themselves reflected in gestures larger than time. They imagine mothers arranging bread, shoemakers pressing leather, children tracing chalk in dust. Pompeii's preservation also changes how we think about history. The ordinary objects, lamps, combs, toys, speak with a clarity that palatial annals and epic poems often do not. They re-anchor history in lived experience. The mosaics, vibrant and intact, tell of taste and trade and aesthetic choices. The city's plan, suddenly legible, teaches us about Roman urban life, about the rhythm of streets, social gatherings in courtyards, commerce at the edges of a plaza. Its burial under ash, which erased it from living maps, paradoxically conserved a mosaic of social detail that might otherwise have been scattered or worn away. Yet even as Pompeii offers this intimate resurrection, it warns. There is a humility embedded in the site's stones. The same soil that yields up beauty yields also the traces of abrupt endings. Visitors who stand before a well-preserved fresco find themselves in the company of absence. The plaster casts, powerful as they are ultimately proxies for lives ended in terror. Their dignity is the dignity of restraint in the face of catastrophe. Archaeology here performs a moral act. It invites us to remember, to hold reverently the fact that these were persons, not curiosities. Across the centuries since that first rediscovery, scholars have argued and revised. Methods have evolved, and public imagination has been shaped by what was found. Excavations have been careful to balance revelation with conservation. Each opening risks exposing pigments and materials to the air that for so long sheltered them. The city remains an ongoing project, an archaeological conversation between the past and the present. Every find yields fresh questions about daily diets, trade routes, family structures, and religious practice. But beyond the facts and the artifacts lies an existential lesson. The fragility of the ordinary and the resilience of memory when the ordinary is preserved. Pompeii's story is also, in a subtle way, a story about the act of seeing. When archaeologists first unearthed painted walls and household goods, contemporary observers could not help but read their own assumptions into the city. We, too, bring our expectations when we look at the mosaics and the baths. The resurrection of Pompeii is therefore twofold. The city returns in material form, and the modern imagination is reawakened to ask what continuity exists between us and those who lived 2 millennia earlier. We see their gestures and are reminded of our own fragilities. To take breakfast for granted, to sleep without guarding against sudden change, to trust that the landscape will keep doing what it has always done. And yet, for all the ruin and loss, there is consolation in the way Pompeii speaks. It insists that human life, its routines, affections, errors, and joys, matters to history. The preserved loaf on a counter, a child's toy found near a hearth, the neatly arranged amphorae in a storeroom, all of these are as significant as any inscription for understanding the texture of a past life. The city's recovery is not a simple triumph over oblivion, but a reminder that the past persists, where it is sheltered, recorded, or accidentally preserved. As you walk away from the excavations, watching sunlight refuse to be completely shadowed by the memory of ash, consider the paradox at the heart of Pompeii's tale. Destruction produced preservation. The very force that sealed the city under meters of debris also created a time capsule. What had been intended by nature as obliteration became, through human curiosity and labor, an extraordinary archive of daily existence. The word resurrected, then, is apt, but careful. It is a resurrection of memory and form, not of those who perished. It is a retrieval of stories and textures, a bringing forward of lives that had been placed out of sight. In the end, Pompeii teaches us to look differently at the things we assume will always be there. The corner cafe, the fresco on a bedroom wall, the laughter in a courtyard. It invites us to think about what we leave behind and how future generations might discover the contours of our ordinary moments. Standing among the ruins, facing a plaster cast that is at once intimate and unknowable, we confront the essential human urgency to remember and to be remembered. That urgency is the city's true resurrection, an enduring conversation between the dead and the living, across ash and age. If Pompeii moved you, like and subscribe to explore more stories recovered from the ashes.